Ever wondered what the real cost of convenience is in our digital world? Tim Jensen, host of Intentionally Inconvenient, dares to question if convenience is truly the enemy of privacy. You'll explore the essence of privacy, why it's worth pursuing, and debunk the myth that it's a lost cause. Together, you will challenge the notion of, I have nothing to hide, and reveal why every bit of your information matters. Remember, all hope is not lost. It's time to reclaim your privacy in this intentionally inconvenient reality.
Hello and welcome to Intentionally Inconvenient, where we talk about our personal freedom through securing our personal privacy. My name is Tim Jensen and I'm your host. First thing I want to do on this episode is review the main points from our last episode, which was our very first episode. And so the very first thing we're going to do is define privacy. Definitions are crucial to how we approach our topics. Let's start by defining privacy. And the way I define privacy is the right to control access to ourselves. So what kind of access are we talking about? We're talking about property ownership. So maybe it's our physical property, maybe it's our intellectual property. Second thing is personally identifying information. We'll get into that shortly. And then the third is physical distance. And so all three of those access points are very important, and we should have control of those three items. So why should we want to have control to access to ourselves? Why do we want that? For one thing, it's for our personal safety. We want to control access to ourselves for our own personal safety, for this, and also secondly, for the safety of those that we have relationships with. Maybe it's our significant other, our spouse, our parents, our children, our siblings, our friends. We want to protect the safety of those that we have relationships with, because otherwise, and we value those people, we value those relationships, or else we wouldn't have them. And then the third is to exercise our free will. Now, in the United States, we have great freedoms. We have the ability of freedom of speech, we have freedom of association. We have the ability to exercise our free will as we so choose, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others. So we're going to try an experiment today as we're going to move forward. I want you to go to your search engine of choice. Maybe it's google.com, maybe it's something else. Type in the following information. Go there, and in the search box, I want you to type in your first name and your last name, and then your city and your state, if you live in the United States, or your city and your province, or wherever you live, if you live in Canada. And then hit enter. Do a search on that information, your first and last name, your city and your state or province, or whatever you call it. And take a look at a lot of the listings and see if there's a pattern that you see. What you find might concern you, it might amuse you, it might intrigue you, but if you find a pattern of your personally identifying information, for me, that would be very concerning. Because I don't remember ever signing an agreement with all of those websites to give them permission to publish my personal information. I doubt you did too. Not an explicit, I hereby give my permission for such and such a website to publish my personally identifying information as they see fit and sell it to whoever they want to. And I don't get anything in the process. That's concerning. I don't know that I would like that scenario, and yet this is a very common scenario in our society today. So let's see here. For most people, what they find is multiple websites that are publicly publishing all kinds of personal identifying information about them. Things like their personal phone number, their personal email address, their physical address where they live, the names of their relatives or their associates, maybe even a map to their house. I've seen that on some of these websites. Maybe it's past places that they've lived, or past email addresses, or past phone numbers, former relatives, and you can take that any way you want to take that. So let's talk a little bit about this topic of personally identifying information, which is the second part of the access that we want to control: physical property, personal identifying information, and physical distance. Personally identifying information, or PII, or PI if you want to call it such, comes in many different forms. For instance, you can be identified by your name, both past and present, if you had a past name. Maybe you got married and changed your name. Maybe you changed your first name. Maybe you go by your middle name. Who knows? Your physical address, where you live, past and present. Your phone number, past and present. Your email address. Your employer. These are things that you can change, and you find that it may be important for you to protect that information. Maybe you didn't give permission for those websites to publish that. Now, let's look at some things that you really can't change because they're in the past and you have no access to change them. Things like your mother's maiden name. How many times have you used that as a point of identifying on websites to verify that it's really you? That's such common information that people have access to now, and it's something you really can't change. Do you really want that published on a data broker's website? That's what those companies are called that you found in the search list, is data brokers. How about your social security number? Can't really change that. The only way you can really change that is to go under the witness protection program of our government, and you give up an awful lot to do that, and your life basically needs to be in danger for that to happen. I'm not even going to get into that topic because it's a bunny trail that I just don't want to go down. How about your birth date? You can't change your birth date. You can't change the day you were born. It's just the way it is. You were born on a specific date in time, and that's it. You can't change that. Your property tax records, if you have such things, or your court records, if you have such things. Your alma mater, where you graduated from. Can't really change that because you already graduated. It's in the past. It's in the history. Other things, historical information that you may have, perhaps family. And I include that in historical information because you have ancestors that go back generation after generation. You've probably heard of websites that publish ancestry records, and they encourage you to sign up and look up your ancestry and to connect the dots for them so that they can sell even more stuff to other people. Maybe it's your friends. You include that in historical information, past and present. Here's other historical information. Sometimes it's historical, sometimes it's current. Height, weight. Not going to comment on that. Ethnicity. Maybe you have tattoos. Maybe you have a scar, a specific scar. Those kinds of things, tattoos and scars, are usually very unique to one person, especially a very specific scar or a very specific tattoo. Dental records. That's a lot of times how they can identify people if they're deceased in a very tragic, in a very gruesome way. They can identify a person through dental records. How about medical information, like any disease history or your ancestry or your DNA or your genetics? Maybe your eye color or your hair color. A unique physical condition. Maybe you're missing a finger. Maybe you're bound to a wheelchair. Maybe you have a very unique physical condition that's very rare. Your clothing preferences. Most people have only so many sets of clothing that they rotate regularly and wash and so forth. You can be identified by the clothes you wear, your fashion sense, if you will. Other personal preferences and habits. Things like consumer habits can identify you. Maybe whether you have savings or not, the type of savings that you have, the type of investments that you use, where you shop, where you do your banking or financial planning, or how you do it or your lack thereof. It all depends. The subscriptions, the things that you subscribe to, whether it's magazines or whether it's memberships in a club of some kind, where and what you eat. Do you eat at home all the time? Do you grocery shop at the same grocery store all the time? All of those things essentially can identify you personally because these things are somewhat unique to you, especially your preferences in those areas. What about personal beliefs? Maybe religion or the church that you attend, or maybe you don't attend a church. Political beliefs can uniquely identify you. It's one data point. Recreation that you choose to do, or entertainment that you subscribe to. We all like certain genres of entertainment more than others, and so we seek those out that we like more. Routines, the type of routines that you go through, television, exercise, reading, or other habits that you might have as a routine that you do on a daily basis. Here's a list. Your technology preferences. For instance, internet service providers that you may use. And I'm not talking about like where you log on to the internet. I'm talking about services like Google or Microsoft or Apple, or social media preferences like Meta or X or Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, whatever. And how you participate on those also helps to identify you as you. Electronic devices, maybe your computers or your tablets or your phones, or maybe, how about this one, your non-internet connected devices. Do you have any of those? Do you use them? Does that matter? Does that help to identify you? Other general things, your family, such as your siblings, your spouse or significant other, your parents, your children, and associations, maybe your current employer, your past employers, your organizations that you belong to, social organizations, public, whatever. Your vocation, where did you go to school? What did you go to school for? And what do you do now? Degrees and certifications, all of these things, that's a lot of personally identifying information to choose from. And it's that composite profile that's put together that helps to identify you as you. We're not even talking about where you travel, how often you travel there, what routines do you have. On weekdays, do you leave your house at X amount of time and then travel a certain route to get to your place of employment every day? Is that logged? How is that logged? I bet you didn't think about that. Maybe you did. We have all kinds of behaviors that we exhibit that identify us and is unique to us, our search history. And this is just a lot of personally identifying information to choose from that profiles us as us. It profiles you as you. Let's see here. What other systems that we have? Okay, forget that. My point here is that there are many things that make you uniquely you. You should be the primary person with the decision rights when it comes to who can know certain personally identifying information about you. Now, not everything. I don't want you to be antisocial. We are social creatures. We are going to be social in nature, and I'm not suggesting we cut off all aspects of being a social person and having relationships with other people. What I am saying is that certain personal information we should keep close to us and only give permission for that information when there is a specific need to give out that information. There's a lot of information that we give out that the person receiving does not need to have. We'll get into that at a later time. Probably not in this episode. And also, who is allowed to share your personal information with others? And do you give them that permission to do that? Because the more permission you give to have others give out that information, the more vulnerable you can become. Now, why does this matter? Who cares, right? Who cares? Maybe you don't care. Maybe you do care. Maybe you're one of these people that says, after all, I have nothing to hide. Really? You don't have anything to hide, huh? You don't have anything to hide. I got nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. Do you lock the door to your house ever? For that matter, do you close the door to your house? How about your car? Do you lock your car ever? You ever close your car's door? Why do you close your curtains at night on your house, your windows? Why do you do that? Do you even have curtains? If you have nothing to hide, why do you have curtains? Do you close your garage door if you have a garage? Why do you do that? Why can't anybody just walk into your garage and look around and do whatever they want to do? You got nothing to hide, right? Really? Why do you close the door when you go to the bathroom? Nothing to hide. Could you please send me copies, if you got nothing to hide, just send me copies of the front and back of all your credit cards and include your zip code, and even your physical address would be helpful, and just mail those off to me. Would you do that? And your checking account information. How about this? Do me a favor. Can you also give me access to your online search history? And also, when you send me those copies of those credit cards, also send me your email account information, your username and password, your bank account information, username and password, maybe the password to your phone, and then just send your entire phone, and just let me know the password to get into your phone. And for that matter, why do you have passwords on any of those things? You got nothing to hide, right? What do you need a password for? You see my point? You understand where I'm coming from? So here's the thing. There, everybody has something to hide, but and it's usually something that other people just don't need to know that much about us. More importantly, and here's what I want you to remember, you have something to protect. You may think you have nothing to hide, but you have something to protect. And that's what's important here. You want to protect your personal property. You want to protect those that you love and live with. You want to protect the things, the physical property that you own from others and what they may do. Do you know there are actually people in society who steal stuff from other people and they don't pay them for it? Isn't that something? That's why we have things like patents and copyrights and for intellectual property, and we have locks for doors, and we have passwords, and we have safes and vaults, and we want to protect things. It has nothing to do with I have nothing to hide, but we have stuff to protect because not everybody is honest 100% of the time. Bet you didn't know that either, did you? If you don't lock your doors, what could possibly go wrong? If you turn over all your credit card numbers, the photocopies that I talked about, and your zip code, what could possibly go wrong? In the wrong hands. We do have things to protect and people to protect. And it starts with, in this digital age, it starts with personally identifying information. We have a governmental system in the United States right now that protects our personal freedom. But imagine living in a situation like what happened in Hong Kong a few years ago, where suddenly their personal privacy was taken from them, and what they would say would put them into prison for a long time. In China, they have a thing called a social score, and they have this app on everybody's phone called WeChat. WeChat is an everything app. It includes payment systems and chat systems of WeChat, of course, and social media. And it's where they get their news, and it monitors their whereabouts because they always carry it with them at all times. It listens to what they say. And if you don't say the right things, if you say the wrong things, if you go to the wrong places, if you do the wrong stuff, or if you go to a place you don't normally go, all of a sudden you may have a government official show up at your door asking you why you went there on such and such a date at such and such a time. You don't normally do that. Could you explain yourself? That social score can dictate where a person is allowed to travel and where they're not allowed to travel in China. Look this up. Everything I'm telling you is verifiable. All you gotta do is look it up. We need to protect our personally identifying information, and some of it more than others of it. And I think you know what it is. But as we go through our episodes, we're going to talk more about specific personally identifying information, and not only why you should protect it, but how you should protect it. in some of the ways that you can protect it. There's options, and some options I use more than others, but I think it's important that we protect our information from the eyes and ears of those who don't need it. Some people are on a need-to-know basis in our lives. They don't need to know your credit card number or your password or your email information. They don't need to read your email. Well, it's interesting. I heard a story not too long ago of my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather bought a farm in his early 20s. I think he was 21 years old when he bought his farm, and he farmed his whole life until he broke his hip and couldn't farm anymore. And then he went out, like a prudent person did back in the early 1900s, and he bought a plot for the family at the local cemetery. And he paid for it with cash and chickens and chicken eggs. And he was given a handwritten receipt with that information. That receipt is on somewhere in my uncle's house right now. It's amazing that the currency that they had back then wasn't digital. They didn't have digital chickens, didn't have digital eggs, didn't have digital cash, didn't have digital receipts. And yet, he got a receipt for chickens, chicken eggs, cash, for a burial plot that he's now buried in. His wife is buried there. His children are buried there. My father is buried there. Several other of those relatives, my mother will be, much of that family. That's the family burial plot. And it was done in a manner that was just cash, chickens and chicken eggs. Now, why am I making a big deal about this? Because these days, most of our transactions are done electronically and can be traced. If he didn't have that handwritten receipt, it wouldn't have been traced at all. He would have had no proof. These days, the government can access all that information, and there's not a thing we can do about it. We'll get into that next time, but I just want you to realize that person identifying information needs to be protected because not everybody needs to know all of your business all the time. Again, this is the Intentionally Inconvenient podcast, show, whatever you want to call it. My name's Tim, and we're going to talk more next time about how to protect our personal freedom through privacy and security. Have a great one, folks. Thanks for listening.
That's all for now from Intentionally Inconvenient, leaving you with a challenge to question the cost of online convenience. If you want to keep learning, subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Your reviews and 5-star ratings help reach more listeners. Until next time, remember, your privacy is never a lost cause. Stay safe, stay private.